All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Hakadash. Double honor to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and salutation to the Akim and to the elect. That are scattered across the four corners of this earth, pushing this truth out in faith and in sincerity. I'm the brother Shemala, and this lesson is going to be entitled The Humility of King David. Now, it's a lot of things, right, that you can basically go into the scriptures, right? A lot of good things, right, that you can harp on about King David, certain things that he did, how he handled this situation and that situation, you know. But on this lesson, I'm just gonna hone in on the humility, right? About something I had read and that I noticed, right, about him, right, on how that King David, he never really big up himself, right? I had a lot of pride in his abilities, had a lot of pride in like who he was, right? He stayed humble, right? No matter the situation, right? And we know David had, one slip up, many slip ups, right? I mean, because we all, have our faults, and we all did these things one way, or another, went off one way or another, right? In the world, much more, right? But also, we have our mistakes in His truth, all right? But David always stayed humble. But let's start here in 1 Samuel 18. All right, it says 1 Samuel 18 and 1. And it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Now, the previous chapter, David had killed Goliath. When everybody else was afraid, David came out and killed Goliath. The Most High was on him. When David got anointed, right, because the Lord was choosing his new king, he said it's going to be among the son of Jesse. And he went and he anointed David, and he said that the Spirit of the Lord basically was dealing with him, from that point forward. Right, was working with him. So he slain Goliath, right, and he got a lot of fame from that. And Saul basically is about to, take him in. Right, it says, and it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was near with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would let him go no more home to his father's house. Right, so Saul basically took him in, and David was like a son unto Saul. Right, so he was growing up in their house. And him and Jonathan was like brothers. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his girdle. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was esteemed in the sight of all the people, and in the sight of Saul's servants. Right? And it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Right? So a David, he was pretty famous from the things that he was doing, from going out to war and fighting them battles. Right? Like that they were singing about him. And we know that Saul basically felt played, you know. Read the next verse. And Saul was very wroth, saying, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? Right? So he's saying that all of the praise that he getting, all he missing is just the kingdom. All right, because he getting more praise than the king. So, Saul basically he start eyeing him from that point forward, right? But when you go down, verse 18, and Saul said to David, Behold, my elder daughter Merab, her will I give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me, and fight Yahweh's battles. For Saul said, let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him, right? Because he's going to basically send him on a mission that he thought that was impossible for David to do. He basically wanted to get him killed, right, and doing what he wanted him to do, right? He's going to send him out against the Philistines. But it said, David said unto Saul, who am I? And what is my life or my father's family in Israel that I should be son-in-law to the king? All right, so he said, bro, who am I? Let's look at it in NLT. Who am I and what is my family in Israel that I should be the king's son-in-law? David exclaimed, my father's family is nothing. But basically, he's saying, like, I'm a nobody. But he getting all this fame. Right? And he's still not letting it get to his head. He got more fame than Saul. Right? But he said, who am I to be, to be your son-in-law? All right. Then when you go down, it says, and Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass, after they went forth, that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by. Right? Let's look at that in the NLT. Every time the commanders of the Philistines attacked, David was more successful against them than all the rest of Saul's officers. So David's name became very famous. So he was getting a lot of fame, like more than anybody. That's how David got most of his fame from being with Saul and from slaying Goliath too, of course. Right, from going out fighting all these battles, and his name was being pushed right throughout that region. Everybody was known about David. Right, even when you go to the king of Achish, right, they all knew about King David. He had to play crazy because he knew that they was he would have died. Right, when you read about the king of Achish, when basically David was on the run from Saul. All right, they said, "Hey, we know, hey, this is David." Basically, start going into his mighty acts that he have done. All right, he wasn't even king yet. All right, so David had fame, but like I said, you see his humility. Now we go here to 1 Samuel 24, right? It says David spared Saul's life, and it came to pass when Saul was returned from following the Philistines that it was told him, saying, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En Gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks of the wild goats. Right, and when you read in this book, right, a few chapters back, Saul was continually, chasing David and trying to kill him, and David was just fleeing away. All right. It says, and he came to the sheepcotes by the way where was a cave, and Saul went in to cover his feet, and David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. And the men of David said unto him, behold, the day which Yahweh said unto thee, behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. All right. So Saul, he went into a cave unknowingly knowing that, David and his men was in there. All right. So David basically had the chance to kill him right then and there. It says, then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. And it came to pass after that David's heart smote him because he had cut off Saul's skirt. So he was afflicted in his mind just from cutting a piece of cloth off of Saul. All right. And you're going to tell me why. And he said unto his men, Yahweh forbid that I should do this thing unto my master. Yahweh was anointed to stretch forth my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of Yahweh. So it's like, man, this don't feel right. Right? He's anointed by the Most High. I'm not finna put my hand on him. All right? He still called him his master. So David stayed his servants with these words and suffered them not to rise against Saul. But Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. You see, so David had an opportunity. He could have killed him right there. All right, he had it, but he chose not to do it. All right, for the reason which he just said. David also rose afterward and went out of the cave and cried after Saul, saying, my lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself. All right, and now he's gonna go into, how that he had an opportunity to kill him, but he didn't, and that, basically Saul was rewarding him, you know, evil for good, right? That the Most High was gonna avenge him. He wasn't gonna avenge himself, you know. But then he says, verse 12, Yahweh judge it between me and thee, and Yahweh avenge me of thee, but my hand shall not be upon thee. So he said, bro, I'm not gonna touch you. Right? He said, let the Most High be judged. Because he was going into how that, hey, do whatever you gotta do, man. You see? And then, he called him his father right here too. Because like I said, he was growing up in that house with Jonathan, right? And he looked at him as a father. And that never changed throughout all of that. So he had integrity. Right? This man was seeking his life, and he could have stood and fought him. Right, from how great of a warrior that he was, he killed Goliath. When Saul didn't even go up against Goliath, he didn't even have the courage to go up against him. But David did. So you think he was really afraid of Saul? No, right? He had love for him. But he said, "After whom is the king of Israel come out? After whom does he pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea?" Now let's read that in the NLT. Who is the king of Israel trying to catch anyway? Should he spend his time chasing one who is worthless as a dead dog or a single flea? And he talking about himself. All right. He's not even, bro, like, because from all the fame that he had, from all of the skills that he got, bro, his name was getting pushed out more than anybody. Everybody knew about David. Like I said, they was knowing about David more than Saul. All of them nations was hearing about David. All right. And people knew that he was up next to be king. Because when you go to the next chapter, when you go to read about Abigail, right? She even said, she told him that, hey, look, and the Lord is gonna make you king. So it was known. People knew that, right? Because she knew about Saul trying to. Everybody they knew about Saul trying to kill David, right? And people knew that who was up next. Right? Even Saul in this chapter admitted it, that you shall surely be king because you done this thing and you didn't take my life. All right, but now you see David never really, you know, had a lot of pride in his position or who he was, and that fame never got to him. All right. You go to Acts 13 and 21. And after they desired a king, and the Most High gave unto them Saul the son of Cis, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, by the space of 40 years. And when he had removed him, he raised up unto them David to be their king. To whom also he gave testimony, he said, I have found David the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. All right. So this was a special man unto the Most High. That's why he was chosen to be king. That's why the Most High chose him out of all of his brothers, because of the spirit that was within him. He knew, what would become of David. Even when David committed adultery, he was the king, but he humbled himself to the Most High, and he knew that he messed up, and he sincerely repented. Right, when he didn't have to do that, he wasn't proud or boastful towards the Most High. All right. So, us as being men of the Lord, hopeful men of the Lord, and being of that hopeful house of David, right? This is something that we could take something from this. I know I can, all right? Because the Lord is going to keep blessing us with wisdom. The Lord is going to keep revealing things unto us. And some of us, will excel more than others, right? Or get, I should say the spotlight, for lack of better words, even though brothers ain't looking for that, right? But you will have those men, right, that it's going to be famous. If their names are famous, you're going to know them from the works that they are doing. All right. You're going to know them. from whatever lot that they may have in his ministry. All right. You're gonna have those men, right? And it's just, something that we can take from this is to never get big headed, basically, because of a gift that the Lord may have given us. Right? You know, um, you may be praised for a gift, and a lot of brothers may know about you, in your camp, right? All right. And you just gotta, no matter what this, that was just an example, but whatever situation it may be, you gotta keep a humble mindset, because the Most I can take away everything from you and bring you to nothing. All right. He said, "The Lord giveth and He taketh away." All right. So you just gotta keep that in mind. Even Yahweh Shai said He made Himself a no reputation. They were trying to make Him king, and He fled. All right. Yahweh Shai showed humility by washing the disciples' feet. All right. So man, it's a lot of things we could learn from all of this. See the characteristics, right, of the men of the Lord. All right, we should want to add it into our spiritual arsenal. So that's the lesson. Hope this lesson was edifying. With that, I'm gonna say shalom.